I hope you have seen this new naming matrix that we have done. This actually started in end of last year and should more or less be introduced to all the product ranges with the new visual aspect, the color change, which is more in line with all of the other products, the drives, PLCs, and so on. So just to make a quick explanation why we do this. It's to make it more easy to understand the concept of the products. So TeSys Power, for instance, are the circuit breakers. TeSys Control, contactors, where you can maneuver the equipment. And Protect is, of course, the protecting overload relays and so on. Then we have the series or the size of it. So Micra, Deca, and Giga. So when we say TeSys Giga for now, it's actually the overload relay and also the contactors and the motor circuit breakers that's included, GV4, GV5, GV6, for those of you that know the reference numbers. Just to be a little repetitive in this one. And of course, the new, where we launched TeSys Island, which is going to be TeSys Active. So I'm going to start by sharing a small introduction video on our trip. So let's hope this works. Hope you enjoyed the trip from 1924 until today. I came back to Schneider 5 years ago, and my feeling is that there's been not so much innovation these last 5 years compared to the last 20 years. So it's a lot of things happening on the motor starter products. So how do we place this product into our EcoStruxure picture? I trust that most of you have seen this before. We have EcoStruxure machine and EcoStruxure plant, and hopefully also TeSys Island. We're now adding also TeSys Giga, meaning TeSys Giga will have one of the features of being a connected product, meaning a connected product where you can get information, data from the contactor up to the PLC and then up to your apps and analytics, get alarms and so on. So we're continuing the trip on monitoring even the contactors. So how have we done this? It's been a big project where we have talked to 38 OEMs and 30 panel builders, end users and distributors, and asked what are your requirements? What would you like to see? The feedback has been stronger coil, easy type selection, lower coil consumption, more protection from overload relay, direct mounting, smart contact for the future, better reliability for the auxiliary contacts, and of course, smaller size. So let's see how we have done this. The TeSys Giga is actually launched during 2021, meaning last year. We are more or less the last region out, meaning the Nordics. This is a decision that we took within the 4 countries. It's never a good thing to be the first one out. Now being almost the last one out, we know we have parts on stock. We are fully up and running with all of the references. So as of today, you can order and use these series. Including in the TeSys Giga, we have both the contactors and of course the overload relay that you can mount directly under the contactor. It's mainly focused on big ratings, power switching application. It's a highly compact module, full scale protection, and diagnostic functions that I mentioned previous slide. We go from 115 to 800 amps, 3 poles and 4 poles available for the contactor. And of course, when we mention 115 to 800, it's the same as we do for the other contactors. We always refer to the AC3, meaning the standard asynchronous motors. So if you have a different application, AC1 or something like that, then we can go into the details on the website and get the data for that. So as an example, the 800 amp for motors is approved for 1050 amps for an AC1 application. For the overload relay, 28 to 630 amps. It's an electronic overload relay, so not a lot of references. We'll look at that later. And available worldwide. So it's the same reference number worldwide. So if you manufacture your equipment in Finland and ship it somewhere else, they can still order spare parts and find exactly the same contactor. Main target for TeSys Giga is actually to substitute the existing TeSys F series. We're currently using TeSys F from 115 to 800 amps. We have a target to try to replace that within a year. So during 2022, hopefully we will be able to support you and make sure you find the most suitable contactor to replace TeSys F series. Key features, it's a new design, new function, smarter, safer. We have a side mounting auxiliary contact. This is the little green thing here. It's the auxiliary contact. You can also mount another auxiliary contact here. So you will have, as a standard always, same as the D series, DECA series, one closing and one opening auxiliary contact, but you can add an additional one here without increasing the width of the contactor. If you add additional one on this side and this one, it will be slightly bigger, but you can then have 8 auxiliary contacts on the contactor. Hang-on features. There's a simple way to mount the contactor with a short screw that you first assemble it to the panel, and then the longer screws to fix it to the panel, which makes it possible for one person to actually mount the contactor on the panel board. Self-diagnostic, local and remote tips, where a level indicator, I will mention this slightly later. Coil under over voltage indicator, you will have an internal fault indicator, and contactor open and close, meaning the status of the contactor, an indicator. And based on the modular design, it's a 35% reduced product size, meaning it's smaller this way. The width of the contactor is about 35% smaller than the F series. This is usually the area where it's most critical. We can replace the switching module. This is the switching module. It's underneath the control module here. So you remove this and you can replace it. And that's calculated to be able to be done under less than 10 minutes. And I would say you can probably do it faster, but 10 minutes, it's a good reference. So everything you can remove from the front here and get access to. Better dust proof, of course, very important. Dust and heat are some of the critical things for the contactor to screw up or shorten the lifetime of the contactor. Modular cable memory for fast spare parts replacement on mounting plate. What does that mean? The cable memory is more or less underneath this little lid here. It means you can remove this and unscrew the switching modules here and replace them without removing the cables in your equipment. These are usually quite large cables, not easy handling, not easy to move. So for that reason, we have put the connection underneath here, and you can easily replace all of it from the front without removing the contactor from the panel. There will be two versions. There will be the Giga, the standard version. The standard version will be very similar to TeSys F series. Price-wise, is usually interesting as well. This will be very much in line with TeSys F. We'll have 3 frames, 115 to 225 amps, and 265 to 500, 630 to 800, and it's the same for the advanced version. The height of this one will be slightly lower, and that's due to the cable memory that's included in the advanced version. It's not included in the standard version. As far as the data, you can see the differences here. Remote control, you can control it 24 volts, low consumption coils, which means you can actually control it directly from a PLC, digital control input PLC, and you can also have remote wear diagnostic. It's an accessory that you connect to the contactor, and you can get a signal out to your PLC that will tell you when it's time to replace your switching modules or the contactor, or if something is wrong. And the cable memory is included, as I mentioned, in this version. Less references. We reduced the number of references quite a lot. About 90% of the references will go away compared to TeSys F. We're moving into an electronic coil, and I put this picture here just to make it easier to understand. Most of the time we use the 230 volts, 400 volts, but as a comparison, KUE is from 100 to 250. We'll replace all of these references. Instead, we only have one reference. So you can imagine there's quite a bit of gain in part number references here, as well as for keeping parts on stock and spare parts and so on. Another change is we have sold TeSys F in with the contactor itself and the coil separate. We will now change that into always sell the contactor with the coil included, with one part number, one reference. So that will make it easier, I think, both for you to select the product and also to keep parts on stock. Lower coil consumption, mentioned that before. Better open close dynamic to enhance electric durability. Basically, it's improved how it closes and opens when you operate it. Self-diagnosis with memory for quick routing cost definitions. I will have a picture of the bit explanation on that one. Connectivity to EcoStruxure by hardwiring, so you can connect it and get the information like we saw on the first page on the TeSys island, for instance, and ready for connectivity through a field bus. Product at a glance. These are all of the involved parts in the Giga contactor. So as you can see, the frame can be mounted on the panel, and all of these parts can be accessed from the front of the contactor without removing it from its original place. And it's quite impressive. Let me see if I can share again another video where you can see the exploded view. It's actually the movie that shows how to replace the switching module, but it also explains how easy it is to access the full contactor. Quick overview of the TeSys Giga. On the self-diagnosis I mentioned before, there is a LED indicator on top of the contactor. It's a different frequency of the LED, so it's flashing depending on what kind of fault you will have on the contactor. Most likely will not see this ever happen, but in case there is an issue. Meaning if you have coil under voltage, you will have 2 beats, coil over voltage, 3 beats. If there's an internal fault, it will be continuous beats, and contact wear diagnostics, 1 beat. Remote wear diagnosis, this is the separate module that you can add to the contactor in the front. You will have a remote alarm, and you will also see 4 beats on the contactor that you have a closed or open signal, depends on which RVD module you select. You will have the same LED indicators on the overload relay, with the alarm is on or internal fault, the indicator motor on will be flashing. Auxiliary block, you saw it on the small picture on the right side, which is always included in the TeSys Giga contactor. It will have push-in terminals. You press this little green button, very easy to disconnect from the contactor or add more auxiliary contacts. There's a mechanical interface to the contactor to lock it and make sure it always follows the status of the contactor. There is ultrasonic welding inside the auxiliary contact because we want to make as dust proof as possible. And there's separate areas for the opening and closing of the contacts. Upgraded material on the tips to make sure we have as long lifetime as possible. And also we can make 17 volts, 1 milliamp signals go through without any problems. So very good. The overload itself, mentioned before, this is an electronic one. So we go from 28 to 630 amps. Trip class E. We usually talk about E when it comes to IE3 motors, and that's what the ACE has been added to. This is the starting class, and so you can select if you want 5, 10, 20, or 30. The starting class is very simply defined as the time it takes from starting the motor until the axle of the motor is up in full speed. So if you have a motor standard, it's usually 10 seconds. If you have a heavy load, a fan, pump or something, it could be 20 seconds. Then you can just select the switch and change it to 20. 3 frames and only 4 references to meet from 28 to 630 amps. Overload protection, of course, ground fault protection, phase imbalance protection, and also ATEX certification. Very good. Flexible configuration. You can select the protection you want, ground fault or phase imbalance. You can select the reset way of the overload relay. If you want it to be manual, which means you manually have to reset it, or auto, which means it has a certain time and it will try to reset itself, or remotely reset it from a distance. Adjustable trip class, mentioned that. 64 different positions on the rotary switch to make sure you hit the exact data or value of the current that you want. Overload alarm, motor on, and internal fault indicator is the one that we saw the little LED before. Simple connection. This is a direct mount, same size as the Giga contactor. So this will snap on directly under the contactor and you just bolt the screws and it's connected. And of course, environmental friendly design, green premium design. It's a unified ID design for the whole series, recyclable packaging. You've probably seen we have moved there are slightly brown packages with some green on it. So it's all recyclable paper. Optimized instruction sheet, and also you've seen on the Deca and most of the other products now, we have this QR code printed on all of our products, so you can easily scan and get the product data, reference number, and so on. Accessories. Mentioned before, you can add up to 3 more auxiliary contact blocks. Each block has one opening, one closed auxiliary. Terminal shrouds for protection. Coupling bars if you want to do star delta or backwards or front reverse drive. Mechanical interlock if you want to have lock the contactors between themselves. So if you front forward drive and reverse drive, you cannot have the contactors in the same position. This is the mechanical interlock to use that. The cable memory, I said before, if you order the advanced version, you will have the cable memory included. If you go with the standard version, you can add the cable memory as a kit to that contactor if you don't see the need for all of the other features in the advanced version. We will have retrofit kits available to replace TeSys F contactors on the market, so easy replacement. And of course, the control and switching modules and coils will be available with the separate part numbers as well. A little recap. Giga series, top features, 115 to 800 amps, 28 to 630 amps overload relays, only 3 frames, 35% reduction of the width, 90% reduced references. It's modular design, self-diagnostics, improved auxiliary contacts, hang-on features, full-scale protection, and of course, connected to EcoStruxure, which we love. I just put this quickly in here as well to show that we have the same standard format for the reference numbers as we have for TeSys Giga and the others. We follow LC1G, 185, AC3, which is the rating. 4 if you have a 4-pole. If you put nothing here, it's always a 3-pole. And then the reference for the coil, and you see the 4 references to meet that. And A if you have the standard advanced version, and with the French logic standard version, we call it N, makes clear sense. And TeSys Protect, the overload relay, LR9G, and then the highest value of the rating, 115, 225, 500, and 600. So quite easily part numbers to order. Tools, we have of course available CAD for ePlan, 3D drawings. IGEXO is something we are working with as well. If you need CAD files, some of them you can download from the website as well, so should not be a problem.